And that is the sound of Mr. Ralph McDonald. On a Sunday morning, Sunday, February 5, a very good morning to you. Sunday morning it is indeed. And when it's a Sunday morning, well, you know what it is. It's time for brunch. When we sit down to brunch, we look at the issues that are peripheral. We look at the issues that are primary. At the end of the day, we attempt to get context. It is that context that drives us to invite many of our guests. And let me let you know who's joining us for brunch this morning. Mrs. Sharon Inglefield will be joining us from Arrive Alive. Superintendent Mathura Singh of the Police Traffic Branch, he will be dropping in with us. Attorney Farai Musaisai will be here. We will talk about, what would we speak about? He's an immigration attorney. You got it? Good. We will trump the discussion. And then we will get to the top of the hour, 11 o'clock, and speak to the chairman of the National Carnival Committee. That's Mr. Kennedy Silva will be joining us, and we will talk about the NCC and Carnival. At the bottom of the hour, that's 11:30, we will be joined by an official from the Children's Authority. And what we will be talking about there is something that is most disturbing, no matter how you look at it, the question of what's happening with our children and the increased reports of predatory behavior by adults on children. So you see, you're all set up, and that's exactly what we're doing this morning. This is Brunch. It is currently 27 minutes. 27 minutes. No, that's 27 degrees. 27 degrees. A high today expected of 30 degrees. Mostly sunny is what the day is going to be like. As you look at the world today, the first thing we see is that the U.S. Appeal Court has agreed with the federal judge who put an injunction, against the ambitions of President Donald Trump. So this is the second defeat he has had. The first one is at the hands of the federal judge. He made an injunction appeal to the U.S. Appeal Court yesterday. That was denied. And Homeland Security is saying that they will begin continuing their welcoming of refugees as of Tuesday. But as immediate as the order, folks with green cards and so on from the 7 named countries, which represents 214 million people, they will begin, as long as they have valid papers, to once again welcome them into the United States. You can't trump that. So that's a wonderful way to start our day. Let me welcome my first guest in this morning, Mrs. Sharon Inglefield, as you know, the executive director of Arrive Alive. She's been with us before and has brought clarity every time, and her advocacy, which begs that we all step up to the plate and do better than we have been doing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thank you, Rennie, for having Arrive Alive on.
It is always good to have you here. We are looking at a situation that a lot of us are still trying to grapple with, and what we're trying to grapple with is a problem of drunk driving. We have been working at that for a long time, but I think it manifested itself in a ugly way. It's never pretty anyway. In a very ugly way, where we had the mother and 2 children killed by a drunk driver. Okay, let me just say an alleged drunk driver, because no test was done of him. They did take samples of his blood, send it to the toxicology center, and they are waiting to see if he will additionally be charged with that. But for now, he's been charged with traveling on the PBR without a permit, failing to stop at a red light, and of course, killing 2 people. He's been charged with getting involved in an accident. 3 charges, three people. Thank you very much, and that's quite correct. All right, but it brings to question most folks who wondered about driving and the state of our roads. Mrs. Inglefield and her organization is not just about drinking; they're about being safe on the road in general. When we look at this case, the man has been given $350 as bail. They have taken his passport. They have, of course, removed his license. It does raise the question, because within 2 years of this accident, he was convicted. He was convicted of drunk driving. Yet he had a license 2 years later. And it does raise the question, are we too understanding, forgiving, or just too light in sentencing those who are found guilty of drunk driving?
I think a lot has to do with rehabilitation and improving the competency of our drivers, particularly if they are caught under the influence, if they're court impaired. I really do believe that our magistrates are doing a great job at zero tolerance. However, because of the lack of competency of our drivers, the lack of education, we really need to see Alcoholics Anonymous being introduced and drivers' education being introduced. Very, very important because of the huge gap that presently exists in our licensing system. We need to see that these drivers go to defensive driving, come to Arrive Alive. We do classes on behalf of a few of the magistrates courts that send offenders to us, and we talk about values and behavior and changing behavior, and we teach about the reasons for the law, whether it's seatbelts, texting and driving, the consequences of bad behavior, the consequences of our actions. I think it's really important that we educate our drivers. Enough is still not being done with regards educating our drivers.
There are two primary areas there. That is one of them, the continuing education of our drivers, because it's always a question of the chicken and the egg. So let's just deal first of all with what I think comes first. The chicken has to lay the egg. Let us go with the chicken. And the chicken has to do with the means, the methods, the ways, and the suspicion surrounding how many of our drivers get their licenses. There seems to be a problem from the licensing authority side.
Well, exactly. And, when we have these classes, when we go out into the communities, whether it's HSS week, whether it's the regional corporations and their borough days, and we get invited by the different communities, whether it's in schools, to the sixth form classes, etc., we always ask the question, how did you get your license? And, people come forward and tell us the fact that they got their license by, unfortunately, paying additionally to get the date brought up. And that's just not good enough, because you're part of the problem if you're paying to get your date brought up or paying to get your license.
And let somebody misunderstand, to bring the date up is not only, it's wrong, but it's not only a case of bringing the date up. It means there's a possibility that you shorten your training period, your learning period.
Exactly, and we need to improve the competency of our young drivers in particular, because they're inexperienced and because they simply don't know. I mean, that Coast Guard officer, that driver of that vehicle in particular, I would like to know whether he realized that his children, by law, should have been in car seats, should have been in booster seats under the age of 5, and there is a way that you buckle them in. Car seats do have an expiry date. The children should be buckled up. Depending on their weight and height, you purchase a car seat dependent on weight and height, not just dependent on the age of a child. And that's education. And a lot of drivers don't realize how important it is to buckle up in the back seat, and that there is a law that exists that if your child is under the age of 5, but particularly with more safety in vehicles and airbags, we also see at Arrive Alive, depending on weight and height, your child should be in the back seat. So if a child is 11 and they have a small frame, it's much safer for them to be in the back seat, because if that airbag deploys, depending on the severity of the accident, they could be killed.
Mrs. Sharon Inglefield, who is from Executive Director Arrive Alive. We are not for a moment, listeners, in case you just tuned in, my name is Rennie Bishop, nice to have you here. We are not for a moment confusing the act that caused the death or seeking to pass blame to anybody. We are merely saying there are some prerequisites that must be employed as a driver, a responsibility. And one of them, you said that we are not saying either that they would have been saved had they had the seatbelts on, but let's just say they would have had a better chance of survival. And
ready to further expound, my son, as you know, died in 2009. Yes. He had on his seatbelt, the airbag did deploy, and he died. So to follow up on your remark, most definitely, if it's a collision where the high speed of the vehicle, physics are against you, and therefore you, depending on the gravity of the accident and the severity of the collision, you as a driver, particularly in the front seat as a passenger, you possibly will die. So there's no getting away from the fact that we shouldn't be drinking and driving. There's no getting away from the fact that it's reckless to drive on that priority bus route, particularly without a permit.
To do so, yes.
And then, of course, we have a number of drivers continuing to break red and amber. Again, a lack of education, because they don't realize you stop on amber. Amber does not mean go. Amber means stop unless you've already started to cross and it's dangerous.
Yes.
To stop. So
if the amber catches you at the intersection or so close to the light that you endanger drivers behind you, then one can understand it. But folks see the amber from a long way, and then they start accelerating.
Exactly.
Yellow does not mean get ready to start. It means get ready to stop. If you're not too sure whether you had start or stop, amber really means caution. So then you look even harder. So this area of continuing education that's offered by your organization is very important. Arrive Alive is the organization.
And we have a number of defensive schools out there, and I mean, we can't hope to teach what they're teaching in their defensive schools, both practical and theoretical. They discuss ABS machines. I mean, we have drivers coming to us that not only don't they know about the law of backseat buckle up and the fact that you stop at an amber, but they don't have a clue that they have an ABS anti-brake locking system in their vehicle. They don't know what that is, and they didn't even know that they had it in their vehicle, and they don't know how to use it. And those are things that we need to teach our drivers prior to the privilege of granting them a license.
Listening to what you're saying here this morning does bring to mind, maybe it is also because of folks who get their license prematurely or illegally and become holders of a gun. Because to me, the best automatic gun you can have in your hand is a vehicle held by a drunk driver, impaired driver. And in that case, I'm wondering whether we should start stepping up the penalty, not only to arrest and convict, charge and hopefully convict those guilty who are licensing officers to who give these license permits or grant these approvals just for money. We should also charge those who are paying the money, because unless you start putting a hurdle for the John, then you just can't just charge the prostitute.
As I keep saying, we're part of the problem if we pay a bribe. We
That's
definitely
right.
are part of the
but
problem.
But we need to have some laws that make folks very clear. You will be charged as an accomplice to committing a crime.
I'm sure there is a law, because that's bribery.
Exactly.
So I'm sure there is a law that will charge you, so that I again appeal to drivers. I appeal to parents.
Yes.
Do not let your children drive your vehicle. Do not let your children, pay these enhancements and ensure that they're doing defensive driving courses prior to obtaining their license and being out on the road. I mean, when you're being taught to drive at 17 years old, you're being taught to drive at 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour. That doesn't make you competent to drive on a highway at 80 kilometers an hour.
Oh, by the way, I just want to mention the definition in the Urban Dictionary, of enhancement is bribery. Just thought I'd mentioned that. Yes. 12 minutes after 10 o'clock. The area of driving drunk and being found guilty, convicted of driving drunk. In the first instance, I proffer one may contemplate, and you may be a disagreement with this, but that once you are convicted of driving drunk, then your license should be suspended for at least 6 months, taken away from you. And in addition to that, you should be mandated to undergo the AA counseling for your drinking problem, in addition to go to defensive driving like your organization offer. Is that too draconian, would you say?
Well, I think the magistrates are going to continue to use their discretion, but we appeal to them to ensure that the drivers who are before you are really being educated as well as penalized, because there are some courts that we just penalize, and I think the lack of education, the lack of literacy is definitely an issue. And certainly we have, in our classes last week when I was in both Port of Spain and San Fernando classes, we had 4 offenders that were caught twice within 3 years, and the other 3 were within a year. So the police are out there doing their job. They are out there arresting DUI offenders. There are a lot of good police out there. So that again, I encourage all police officers to ensure that you have a responsibility to save lives, a responsibility to make sure our roads are safe. And then when you take an enhancement as well,
bribe.
You're causing death on our roads.
The other area that has to be paid attention to is the whole question of police enforcement. The minister responsible for works and transport mentioned that a number of cameras that are out there are going to be operationalized. I think that is very encouraging, because police officers cannot be everywhere. Cameras don't take bribes. Cameras don't listen to reason. Cameras just look at what you have done and say, here is your ticket. I think the faster we get that, the better we will.
Certainly, and we've been lobbying for this a very long time. So we need to pass a law, ticketing by camera, and we need to see those cameras operational ASAP, particularly at the intersections. because the intersections are where we're having a lot of these fatalities. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot more cameras on our highways, a lot more cameras at our intersections, and therefore ticketing by camera. And I really do think this will encourage, encourage a decrease in crime overall in our country, because everybody has to travel on our roads.
Sharon Inglefield is the voice that you're hearing with us this morning. Listeners, thank you so much for giving us of your time. One of the areas that left an indelible mark with me is one time when the argument came up of increasing speeds and so on. You made reference, you alluded to a study that spoke of Trinidad and Tobago roads not being user-friendly. Folks, in the rush, when they hear one say, for instance, well, I'm not too sure I want you to increase the speed limit, but instead create better driving conditions. They say, oh, you're just against speed. Maybe you're not going anywhere. But there are real factors in the unpredictability of a road surface, an inaccurately contoured curve, and different things that fall under the category of not user-friendly, that in fact has a great determination on how safe we drive. And that's one of the things that you alluded to that your organization is asking for.
Certainly, because besides the competency of the driver, we also need to ensure that our roads are safe, that our roads are maintained to 3-star status, and that we close the gap on all the black spot locations. For instance, very recently, I compliment the ministry for milling that M2 Ring Road that in Debe, where we had, I believe, 13 fatalities in under 4 years, and that road has recently been milled. We really do hope that we see no more fatalities on that road. We were actually asking for humps because of the fact that 13 people lost their lives, and that is crazy. So that you need to implement an engineering remedy sometimes to close the gap where we have a number of fatalities, and therefore to increase speed, besides making our drivers competent, besides enforcement, we also need to make our roads safe. So besides the barriers, the white lines, the signage, the pavement of the road, in other words, the asphalt surfacing, we also need to look at roads like that, M2 Ring Road, where we had those collisions, and what can we do to close the gap to ensure that no more life is lost on that road.
You will forgive my ignorance, but when you say black spots, black areas, are you speaking about what I think is a real black area, which is you're about to take a corner, you're coming out and somebody's got a driveway, and there's a car popping out there. If that is not it, please explain what a black
spot location is. Where you have a collision, a serious collision, and in particular in a developed country, once there's a fatality, a serious collision, and people are injured, that becomes a black spot location.
I see. Okay.
And it is like a crime scene. You rope it off with caution tape, and you examine the vehicle, the driver, and the actual road location, the location in the road where the collision existed, to see whether the road was cambered properly, whether there were barriers, whether the pavement of the road was perfect, whether the speed limit, because of the speed limit, you have too many people having collisions because of the speed limit at that particular corner. So that once there's a serious collision, much less a fatality, it becomes a black spot location.
Thank you for the clarity on that area. We are looking at, like I said, it's very dangerous. Sometimes you're about to take a corner. Drivers have this habit, if they're coming out of a driveway or something, to put an eighth of the vehicle out in the road. And you're coming around a corner. I think something should be done about having folks with driveways that are on what can easily be considered a blind corner. It's crazy. You're about to turn, you're staying in the left lane except when overtaking, which you're supposed to be, and the vehicle pops up and kicks the front of itself in front of you, and you're invariably going to pull to your right. And in doing that, you're endangering anybody on the right, or you start driving erratic. I really think that's part of the area they need to look at.
Yeah, there are lots of areas, and the problem is a lot of the residential communities have now changed into commercial entities. Yes. So it is a real issue, and that's why in particular in that location, you would see the speed limit at 25 kilometers an hour. If it's a residential community, if it's around a school, if it's around a heavily populated office environment, the speed limit needs to be no more than 25 to 30 kilometers an hour to avoid a fatal collision or serious collision.
Sharon Inglefield, I've got 60 seconds working with me on this part of it. I do have to make one observation and one inquiry of you. Observation is, I find they really need to have some kind of uniformity with these humps. Some of them are really high, they're dangerous to your vehicle, and some of them are, before you even breathe from one to the other, you can't even work up to 10 miles an hour before you hit the other hump. That's one point. And that's the commentary. Here comes the inquiry. What's on the agenda for Arrive Alive that you would like to see prioritized in the next 6 months?
Well, certainly that demerit point system, this, speed by ticket by camera. We need to see the roads continue the maintenance. The ministry is doing a much better job in the last few years of maintaining our infrastructure. We need to have a directive with regards traffic management. And therefore a budget towards traffic management and just not highway expansion, but safety on our roads and traffic management is a priority. I keep saying we can't continue to build highways without safety factored in, and safety is a big issue in a number of our roads that need to be fixed right now. We also have loads of residential communities popping up and no planning towards traffic management in those locations. So we continue to lobby for that. We continue to lobby for more enforcement and for the accountability of our officers when they're out there to ensure that you are saving lives, that preventative roadblocks, preventative measures to ensure that the death toll continues to go down. And I compliment all of the first responders, the fire, the police, etc., because every year we see a drop, as well as, of course, the traffic engineers within the ministry and the policymakers, because we're doing a much better job on the statistics. We should all be proud because the statistics show that the death toll has gone down every year by a little bit. However, that driver who just lost his wife and 2 children, every life matters, and therefore we don't want to just dwell on the statistical information. So we want to see that demerit point system. We want to see more enforcement, but we also want to see education and to ensure that our drivers are made more competent by education. Using that education as the departure point, how can our listeners best get in touch with the organization? Well, we're there on Facebook. We're there on our website, arrivealivett.com, 675-LIVE. We have volunteers that are there from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon answering our phone, and I think everybody knows who we are at this stage, and you know how to contact us. Trinidad is a small place. We need volunteers, we need help, and we welcome anyone who is who is passionate about road safety into our organization as a volunteer. Sharon Inglefield, thank you so much for taking the time this Sunday morning and coming in. Always good seeing you. Always thankful for your clarity. Thank you, Rennie. This morning is no exception. Have yourself a wonderful week. Same to you. Thank you so much.